In the midst of a treacherous labyrinth infested with the undead, the brave Geldwood soldiers find themselves in a dire situation. Despite their valiant efforts, several of their comrades have succumbed to blades, shot out by the terrifying corpse god, a formidable necromancer unmatched in power. Forced to retreat with their wounded, the soldiers face a grim fate. But just as hope seems to be slipping away, a figure emerges from the shadows. It is none other than Sir Shagrua Edith Lugrid, renowned as the church's Calamity Crusher. Accompanied by Rikuria Lafalardo and her team of fellow priests and priestesses, they rush to provide support. With unwavering courage, Sir Shagrua strides forward, confronting the corpse god alone, while his team stands ready to assist. The battle between Sir Shagrua and the corpse god reaches a fever pitch, as the necromancer expertly fends off Shagrua's relentless attacks. But the corpse god's twisted power is revealed as he converts the souls of the deceased, from the bones strewn about him and the land itself, into dark magic. The Geldwood soldiers outside the labyrinth watch in horror as the corpse god calls forth a dragon bound to his will. Undeterred, Sir Shagrua channels his inner strength and strikes with all his might, cleaving the dragon in twain with a single, powerful blow. The clash between Shagrua and the corpse god intensifies, with both combatants exchanging fierce blows. Amidst the chaos, memories from Shagrua's past come flooding back. He remembers the burning of his village, and how the souls of the villagers blamed him for their demise before the Geldwood knights took him in. He also recalls the countless souls of those he and Geldwood have slain over the years, all of them condemning him in death. Fueled by righteous anger, Shagrua's eyes blaze with an intense light as he confronts the corpse god. He reveals that he can see all the souls that the necromancer has sacrificed, exposing the true extent of the corpse god's evil deeds. As the army of articulated skeletons advances, Shagrua uses his powerful magic to disarticulate some with a fireball, and dislodges stalactites with another spell, causing them to crash down upon the remaining skeletons. But the corpse god is relentless, continuing to assemble his undead forces. With a direct sword strike to the corpse god's ribcage, Shagrua reveals a brain in a jar suspended by chains, the true form of the corpse god, for which he has sacrificed so many souls. Corpse god taunts Shagrua with a cruel remark that stirs Shagrua's anger. He accuses Shagrua of enjoying the suffering of his victims, comparing them to playthings. Shagrua, determined to stop corpse god's unrecognizable magic, ignores the provocation and focuses on the spell being woven. Thankfully, Rikuria, a powerful ally, enhances Shagrua's abilities as he charges forward with his sword, aptly named Calamity Crusher. With a spell and a final strike, Shagrua's sword pierces through the magic, engulfing the room in a burst of magical energy. The scene then shifts to a teenage boy, who replays a hazy moment in his mind while lying in an alley. He remembers casting a spell but is uncertain if it worked. As he opens his eyes to a gray sky and unfamiliar surroundings, he realizes he has a frail body and bloodied neck, making speaking difficult. Despite his weakness, he manages to stand and walks out of the alley into an urban square. Everything around him, from the architecture and transportation to the clothes and language, is completely foreign to him, leaving him bewildered and out of place. Takumi Karuya, a skilled operator of a drone, uses his equipment to remotely observe the team with the slit throat. However, to his surprise, he realizes that the target is still alive and cancels the retrieval with a phone call. The teen, frail and injured, walks slowly through an unfamiliar urban landscape, taking in the strange signs and a video featuring an idol named Ryoma Kanagi. He wonders if it's a projection spell, but senses no magic at work. As he sits down to rest on the steps leading to Shinjuku Station, he observes the children passing by, noting their happiness and good health, which implies that the country he's in is peaceful. This triggers memories of the country he left behind, including a haunting recollection of an undead and children gathered around a cooking pot. Despite not knowing if he can ever return to that country, he fervently hopes that it has a future. As Poka Shinoyama, the teen with the slit throat, walks through Shinjuku, he is approached by two policemen who greet him in the local language. Initially unable to understand them, Poka realizes that he is starting to comprehend their words more and more as they speak. The older policeman questions him about the blood on his neck and shirt, while the younger asks for his name. Struggling to speak with his strained throat, Poka haltingly replies, "So, this is Japanese. This body's name is Poka Shinoyama." Before the policeman can fully grasp the severity of Poka's injury, Misaki Sakimiya, who had been observing from afar, lands on the younger policeman's head. She expresses relief that Poka is alright, grabs his hand, and swiftly leads him away. Kozaburo Arasa, who had been observing the scene from a distance, asks Tsubaki Ivanome if there's something's up. Ivanome replies that there's always something happening in Shinjuku. Misaki leads Poka into an alley and introduces herself, asking if he remembers her. Poka tries to recall, but the memory pains him. Misaki then shakes him down to confirm that he is indeed alive, and declares that she will kill him for a second time, puzzled like Takumi at how a crowbar to his neck didn't finish the job the first time. The mention of the crowbar in his neck triggers Poka's memory, and he realizes what happened. He takes off running, with Misaki hot on his heels. Meanwhile, Takumi, who is observing the situation through his drone, questions the motives of Misaki's client for putting a hit on a 16-year-old. However, he knows that what matters more than a client's motives is their payment, and for the sake of that money, Poka needs to stay dead this time around. Poka finds refuge inside an abandoned building, his body weakened and lacking in magical strength. He realizes that magic is scarce in the air and on the land, with a noticeable absence of magical elements. With no access to magic, Poka is unable to treat his fresh wound, and he knows that a fatal wound would be impossible to heal without it. Misaki enters the building through a window, and Poka has to rely on his agility and resourcefulness to evade her attacks. She hurls 5 knives at him, but he narrowly dodges them. Using a piece of pipe as a makeshift weapon, Poka parries Misaki's crowbar, barely managing to hold her off each time. Motivated by the promise of a peaceful land and memories of the children he left behind, Poka summons all his strength to run past Misaki. However, she manages to lodge a throwing knife in his right calf. Despite the pain, Poka yanks the knife out and hurls it past Misaki's face, narrowly missing her, as he limps as fast as he can around a corner and enters the first room he finds with a door. Poka finds himself in a room with a high ceiling adorned with hooks and ropes, and the floor cluttered with barrels, tubs, and sacks. Misaki reveals that this building is infamous in her line of work as a rumored major execution ground for the Yakuza, said to be haunted by ghosts and gangsters. She moves towards Poka, causing him to lurch away, but he falls as she injures his right thigh, causing him pain. However, the mention of ghosts and gangsters meant to scare Poka doesn't have the same effect on him as it would have in his own body. Poka's possessor possesses the evil eye, which allows him to see the souls of the Yakuza's victims, strung up on chains, lying in dissolving tubs, scattered on the ground, and huddled in the corner. This realization confirms the possessor's suspicion that the evil eye is not tied to anatomy, but rather a power of the soul. Poka, now in possession of the corpse god's immense power, expresses his disdain for how the Yakuza treated lives so carelessly, and urges Misaki to show more respect for the souls of her victims that haunt her in that very moment. As Misaki charges towards him once again, Poka, also known as the corpse god, converts the souls of her victims into magic with a mere gesture of his monstrously large skeletal hand. He impales Misaki and pins her to a pillar, leaving Takumi, who was watching with his drone, gasping in shock. As Shagrua stood near the shattered jar that once held Corpse God's brain, and looked at the skeletal husk that Corpse God once inhabited, he confided in Rikuria, expressing uncertainty if he had truly completed his job. Corpse God had succeeded in activating his spell, which had appeared to be teleportation magic when Shagrua had seen his soul vanish with his evil eye. Rikuria kindly reassured him, citing a report from the observation unit that all traces of Corpse God had vanished from the world. "You saved the world," she insisted. Sir Shagrua could only hope that she was right, but his doubts lingered. Meanwhile, Corpse God's mind had cleared, and he informed the limp Misaki in a strong and unhampered tone that he was grateful that his spell had brought him to a peaceful land, and Misaki had led him to a place brimming with magical power. He demonstrated this by replenishing his own power with the souls from the Yakuza's past. He declared that he and Misaki would now play together as the Grim Reaper, wielding his newfound abilities. Misaki remains unresponsive as he retrieves his serrated skeletal blades from the mysterious magic circles. Corpse God, never one to hold back, scolds Misaki for pretending to be asleep and shakes her down, just as she had done to him earlier, hoping to confirm that she is alive. However, to his astonishment, Misaki is undeniably, unmistakably dead. And with that, we conclude this episode.